this section of the course, we're going to be focused on the fundamentals of security. Now, before we can dive deep into any technical discussions around SQL injections or password cracking or securing your enterprise systems by configuring your firewalls, we need to first cover some basics that you simply must understand. Now, as a cybersecurity professional, you're going to find that it is really hard to ensure the security of your networks and systems. Now, this is hard not just because we have bad actors out there who are trying to hack into our network and steal our confidential data, but also it's hard because we have internal threats too, like our end users, who often try to bypass our internal security controls as well. Why? Well, because there's always going to be a friction that exists between the security of the network and the usability or convenience of that network. Now, let me give you a quick example here so you can probably relate to it. Now, at your house, you probably have an internet connection from your cable provider, your phone company, or some third-party internet service provider. Regardless of which one you have, most of these companies send you a single device that contains the modem as well as a router inside of it that provides wireless access throughout your house so you can have a Wi-Fi access point there. Now, by default, the internet service provider will give you a preset password that's pretty long and complicated in most cases. On the front of my device, for example, the company has a sticker that says the name of the wireless network and the password, such as wireless network ATT142DFE and a long, strong password of 3% 1WT ampersand exclamation 92 hashtag SXH. Now, I don't know about you, but that's a pretty long and complicated looking password. Now, most users will simply change this password to something easy to remember, like magic2912 or cupcake #1 or something like that. Now, while this is great for convenience and usability, it really does decrease the level of security you have because it's easier for a cyber attacker to crack that password because it is short and it uses dictionary words inside of it. But that longer, more complex password, which is normally more secure, is actually really difficult to memorize, and this also brings another critical weakness to it, which is the fact that it's printed right on the front of the modem for anybody who walks by to see it and write it down. Now, the truth of the matter is that with security and usability, we're always going to have these two things at odds. Even if you create the most secure system in the world, your end users will try to bypass those restrictions you put in place because it's making their day job much more difficult to complete. So remember, our end users are people, and people want things easy. They want them convenient. But as we give them more convenience, we're usually going to have to loosen up our security posture a little bit. And conversely, if we try to increase security too much, we're going to make things so challenging and so difficult for our users that they're actually going to take away all that convenience level, and they'll try to find ways around what we've done. Now, as a cybersecurity professional, this is a delicate operational balance that we're always dealing with inside of our organizations. Our organizations are having to fight this challenge all the time to be able to support the convenience that our users want while giving them more security. And this is one of the reasons why we continue to have cyber attacks and data breaches to this day, because as we give them more convenience, we loosen up our security. Now, in 2022, the average major company that had a data breach spent $4.35 million per data breach. That is an amazing and large figure. But the reason it is because we have a security versus convenience trade-off that's happening, and people have chosen the wrong things to trade off. Now, we can make things easier for our users for them to get their work done on a daily basis, but still making sure it's challenging enough that our threat actors can't hack their way into our networks. And that right there is the dream. That's the sweet spot we're trying to obtain. So in this section of the course, we're going to start out by covering the fundamentals of security. And before we do that, we need to cover two important definitions. Now, whenever you're working as a cybersecurity professional, you're going to hear people talk about two key terms when we're talking about security. We talk about these as information security and information system security. Now, it's important to know the difference because these are two different terms. Information security is the act of protecting the data and information from unauthorized access, unlawful modification and disruption, disclosure or corruption, and destruction. Simply put, when we talk about information security, we are talking about the data that the systems are holding, not the systems themselves. Now, on the other hand, we have information system security, which is the act of protecting the systems that hold and process our critical data. That can be a computer, a server, a network device, or even your smartphone. Remember, if somebody's talking about protecting the data itself, they are talking about information security. But if they're talking about the devices that hold the data, now we're talking about information system security. Now, in this section, we're going to be focused on Domain 1 and specifically Objectives 1.1 and 1.2. Objective 1.1 states that you must be able to compare and contrast various types of security controls, and Objective 1.2 states that you must be able to summarize fundamental security concepts. And this is what I was talking about when I mentioned that they don't always put the objectives in the right order, because the thing we need to learn first is actually Objective 1.2 before we can cover 1.1. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this section. So as we kick off this section, we're going to start with Objective 1.2, and we'll first start out by covering the CIA triad. Now, the CIA triad stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and these are the three pillars of security. Confidentiality ensures that information is only accessible to those with the appropriate authorization. For example, if you encrypt sensitive files so only authorized people can read them and decrypt them, that is confidentiality. Now, integrity is going to ensure the data remains accurate and unaltered unless modification is required. For example, checksums can be used to verify that a file has not been changed or corrupted as it moves along our network during a data transfer. Availability ensures that information and resources are accessible and functional when needed by authorized users. So a good example of availability would be your website when you implement redundancy measures to ensure it remains online and up anytime, regardless of how much traffic it's receiving. So even if you have a period of high traffic, it'll be able to handle that due to your redundancy, and this gives you good availability. Next, we're going to cover the concept of non-repudiation. Non-repudiation means guaranteeing that a specific action or event has taken place and cannot be denied by the parties involved. For example, if I send you an email and I digitally sign it, that's going to ensure that I cannot deny sending you that particular message because my digital signature is attached to it. Now, in the old days, we as cybersecurity professionals always talked about the CIA triad. But in recent years, we have now added two new things to it, an N and an A, and that's non-repudiation and authentication. This essentially makes it a pentagon more so than a triad, because now we have CIA-NA, which is 5 letters, and a 5-sided shape is a pentagon. Now, with the introduction of this authentication into CIA-NA, we now move into this area of the triple A's of security, which we call authentication, authorization, and accounting. Now, authentication is the process of verifying the identity of a user or system. For example, when you try to log in to get to your email, your username and password is being checked against a stored version to confirm your identity. Now, once you've been authenticated based on your identity, we then move into authorization. And authorization determines what actions or resources an authenticated user has permissions to perform. For example, in a company database, you as an employee may have the authorization to view records, but you may not be authorized to actually edit them. So you have read permissions, but not write or edit permissions. Now, the third area we have is what's known as accounting. And accounting is the act of tracking your user activities and resource utilization. And typically we do this for auditing or billing purposes. So when you log into your computer, we're actually logging what you do. All those user activities on the network are being logged to be able to monitor them for unusual or unauthorized behavior. And that would be a good example of accounting. After that, we're going to cover the different security control categories and types. Now, security controls are measures or mechanisms that are put in place to mitigate risk and protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information systems and their data. These security controls can be grouped into categories like technical, managerial, operational, and physical controls. But we can also discuss the different types of security controls we have, like preventative, deterrent, detective, corrective, compensating, and directive controls. Then we'll discuss this concept known as zero trust. Now, zero trust is a newer security model that operates on the principle that no one, whether inside or outside of your organization, should be trusted by default, and verification is going to be required from everybody who's trying to gain access to your system's resources. Now, in order to achieve zero trust, we have to use a control plane and a data plane. The control plane consists of the adaptive identity, threat scope reduction, policy-driven access controls, and secured zones. The data plane, on the other hand, is going to be focused on the subject and system, the policy engine, the policy administrator, and establishing policy enforcement points. Finally, we're going to take a short quiz to see what you learned during this section of the course and review each of those quiz questions fully to ensure that you can explain each question and why the right answer was right. So let's get started diving into the fundamentals of security in this section of the course. And these threats come from external sources, things like natural disasters, cyber attacks, data integrity breaches, disclosure of confidential information, and many other incidents that can arise during our daily operations. Unfortunately for us, though, as cybersecurity professionals, we cannot fully control all of these threats, but we can try to minimize their impact by mitigating against them. Unlike threats, though, we do have the ability to control our known vulnerabilities within our systems. Now, a vulnerability is any weakness in the system design or implementation. As cybersecurity professionals, we can control vulnerabilities because they come from internal factors. Things like software bugs, misconfigured software, improperly protected network devices, missing security patches, lacking physical security, and so much more. But these vulnerabilities are all within our control, or at least within our organization's control for us to prevent these vulnerabilities from being exploited by mitigating, transferring, avoiding, or accepting the risks involved with those vulnerabilities. This then becomes essentially a risk management decision as we start looking at how we're going to handle the vulnerabilities inside of our systems and our networks at large. Now, when it comes to threats and vulnerabilities, it's important to remember that where they intersect, that is where the risks to your enterprise systems and networks actually lie. This is a key point for you to understand, because your job as a cybersecurity professional is essentially to manage the risk of those systems and networks, and every decision that you make during your workday is going to involve either mitigating, transferring, avoiding, or accepting the risk within those systems. Remember, if you have a threat but there is no matching vulnerability to it, then you have no risk. The same holds true in reverse, because if you have a vulnerability but there's no matching threat against it, there is also no risk. Let's consider the example of trying to get to work in the morning on time. Now, your alarm clock goes off just after 6 a.m., and you hop out of bed. You get dressed, you eat your breakfast, and now you have to get from your house over to your office. But there are vulnerabilities and threats all around you that could cause a bad outcome to occur. And in this example, that would be you arriving to work late and your boss getting upset with you. Now, I know this seems like a pretty simple example, but there is a variety of things that could happen to cause this negative outcome to occur. And as you go through your day, almost every day, you're conducting risk management without even thinking about it as you navigate from your house to your office. So let's consider a few possible vulnerabilities that could cause you to not get to work on time. For example, you might have forgotten to fill up your car the night before, so now you won't have enough gas or energy or fuel to drive to work without stopping at a fueling station. We call this vulnerability a lack of preparation. Or you might have forgotten that it was your day to drop off the kids at school before you go into work. So this is something we might call a scheduling vulnerability. Or maybe you forgot to perform the routine maintenance on your car, and this could cause it to break down before you get to the office. And this we would call a vehicular vulnerability. There's lots of different possible vulnerabilities that could harm your plan of getting to work on time. But you do have control over these because these vulnerabilities were all created by internal factors that you could have done something about. Now, on the other side of the risk equation, though, there are several threats that are trying to prevent you from arriving to work on time, and these are usually going to be outside of your control. For example, maybe an impatient driver ended up causing an accident on the freeway and now you're stuck in traffic, which is going to cause a delay to your commute and you're now going to be late to arrive to work. This is a realization of that risk because somebody caused the accident. You can't prevent the other driver from having driven irresponsibly and causing an accident that delays your commute. That is outside of your control because it's an external threat factor. Or there could have been a natural disaster like an earthquake, and this causes the road between your home and your office to be completely destroyed. Now, I know I'm being a little bit melodramatic here, but hopefully you're starting to get the idea here. This is an external threat that's caused by the environment itself. You simply can't stop an earthquake. It's going to happen when the earth wants it to happen. So there is a threat out there that you won't arrive to work on time if that earthquake actually happens and that risk is materialized. So now that we have several threats and several vulnerabilities that we've talked about, we now need to think about what we can do about them. Well, if we're worried about being late for work, one thing we could do is wake up earlier. Instead of waking up at 6 a.m., we could choose to wake up at 5 a.m. That way we have an extra hour of buffer time in case anything goes wrong, like we need to stop for gas, or we run into traffic, or we have to find an alternative road to work because our normal roadway is blocked because of earthquake damage. In any of these scenarios, that extra time buffer that we create by waking up an extra hour early can serve as a mitigation to any of these risks that might be realized. We don't stop the traffic jam or try to prevent the earthquake from happening, but instead we give ourselves time to change our routes and still get ourselves to work on time. Now, this at its simplest form is risk management. It's finding different ways to minimize the likelihood of a certain outcome from occurring and achieving the outcomes that you really want to achieve. In the case of this daily commute, our outcome is getting to work on time without being late. In the world of cybersecurity, though, it means we want to provide a continuity of services to our end users, we want to maintain the overall security of our systems, and we want to protect our organizations from data breaches by minimizing our vulnerabilities or utilizing proper mitigating actions to minimize the impact that the threat would have on our enterprise systems if the risk is realized. In this lesson, we're going to cover confidentiality. Now, confidentiality is a foundational concept in the world of information security, and it refers to the protection of information from unauthorized access and disclosure. Confidentiality is used to ensure that private or sensitive information is not available or disclosed to an unauthorized individual, entity, or process. Imagine you just walked into your local bank and saw a stack of personal loan applications being left out in the open for anybody to see. Each application contains lots of sensitive data, including the bank customers' names, their addresses, their social security number, their work history, their income, and all sorts of things like that. If I saw that, I'd be pretty alarmed, and I'm pretty sure you would be too. That's because most of us have an expectation that our sensitive banking details will be kept secret and only revealed to people who are authorized to see it, such as the bank tellers or the bank managers. Well, the same expectation occurs for most of us inside of our computer networks. We expect that confidentiality is going to occur and that people aren't randomly accessing data or information from our laptops, smartphones, or tablets without our knowledge, consent, or approval. After all, confidentiality is all about keeping your information secret and safe from prying eyes, while at the same time allowing authorized people to access that data that they need. So, why is confidentiality so important? Well, confidentiality is important for three main reasons. This is to protect your personal privacy, to maintain a business advantage, and to achieve regulatory compliance. Now, the first reason that confidentiality is important is for you to be able to protect your personal privacy. Just as you wouldn't want your personal letters read by strangers, most individuals don't want their personal data, including their health records or financial details, being shared without their consent. So, as cybersecurity professionals, we seek to ensure that our data remains safe from prying eyes in order to maintain the confidentiality of that data. The second reason that confidentiality is important is to maintain a business advantage. Now, most businesses have proprietary data that's used in their daily operations, including information about their products, their clients, and their overall business strategy. Keeping this information confidential is crucial for maintaining a competitive edge within your industry. And the third reason that confidentiality is important is to achieve regulatory compliance. Now, many industries have regulations that mandate the protection of certain types of data, like personally identifiable information, or PII, protected health information, or PHI, financial data, and various other types of data too. If you fail to maintain confidentiality of these types of data, your organization could be levied a fine against it and pay a large penalty for non-compliance. So it's important to follow all the mandatory regulations within your industry. Now, in order to ensure confidentiality, we're going to use 5 basic methods: encryption, access controls, data masking, physical security measures, and training and awareness. First, we have encryption. Encryption is a process of converting data into code to prevent unauthorized access. Even if somebody intercepts the data, they won't understand it unless they have the decryption key. Essentially, with encryption, we're scrambling up the plaintext data into an indecipherable jumble until the right decryption key is provided, in which case the scrambled data, which we call ciphertext, can then be quickly presented again in its plain text format. Second, we have access controls. By setting up strong user permissions, you're going to be able to ensure that only authorized personnel can access certain types of data. Access controls can be set up by creating password-protected files or securing access to a database by using a username and password or other types of credentials. For example, your boss might want you to save your personnel record on the company's shared drive, but they only want themselves to be able to access it. In this case, they can set permissions for that record so they have full access to read and write information to that file, but nobody else can. Third, we have data masking. Now, data masking is a method that involves obscuring specific data within a database to make it inaccessible for unauthorized users while retaining the real data's authenticity and use for authorized users. For example, if your customer service system stores your user's credit card number, you could use data masking so the first 12 digits of the 16-digit number is masked, and only the final 4 digits of the customer's credit card is going to be displayed to your support agents. This type of confidentiality helps prevent accidental disclosures of the sensitive information, and in this case, that would be the entire 16-digit credit card number, while still allowing some portion of it to be viewed for identification purposes. Fourth, we have physical security measures. Now, physical security measures are used to ensure confidentiality for both physical types of data, such as paper records stored in a filing cabinet, and for digital information that's contained on servers and workstations. To protect data using physical security controls, we can lock our filing cabinets, install biometric security locks on the server room door, install security cameras to detect any physical data breaches, or other types of physical security controls that we might want to use. Fifth, we have training and awareness. Often, breaches in confidentiality are going to occur due to human error, negligence, or malicious intent. To help prevent human error and negligence, you should conduct regular training on the security awareness best practices that employees can use to protect their organization's sensitive data. So remember, confidentiality is the principle of ensuring that information is only accessible to those who have the right to access it. Whether through encryption, access controls, data masking, physical security measures, or training and awareness, our goal is going to be to protect our organization's sensitive data from prying eyes. Anytime you're asked about confidentiality, your answer should always have something to do with protecting data from being seen by unauthorized users. Most commonly, we do this using encryption, so I really want you to link the words confidentiality and encryption in your mind. In a digital age where information is our digital currency, maintaining the confidentiality of our organizational data is really important and critical to ensuring that we can maintain our customers' trust, meet our regulatory compliance requirements, and achieve continuous business operations inside of our enterprise networks. In this lesson, we're going to cover integrity. Now, integrity is the cornerstone in the realm of information security because it helps to ensure that information and data remains accurate and unchanged from its original state unless intentionally modified by an authorized individual. In essence, integrity verifies the accuracy and trustworthiness of the data over its entire lifecycle. Now, let's imagine that you just finished an important final exam in school and you handed it over to your instructor to be graded. You'll probably have the expectation that nobody else is going to tamper with your answers or make unauthorized changes between the time you handed it into your instructor and the time that you got your grade back for that exam. Now, if nothing was modified or changed, we would say that your exam integrity was maintained. Similarly, in the world of cybersecurity, we expect that our data is going to be reliable and unaltered as it's processed, transferred, and stored by our systems and networks. So why is integrity so critical? Well, integrity is important for 3 main reasons. We want to ensure data accuracy, we want to maintain trust, and we want to ensure system operability. First, we want to ensure data accuracy is occurring. Ensuring data accuracy is probably one of the most important reasons for worrying about the integrity of your organization's data. Just as you wouldn't want somebody to alter your written words without your consent, similarly, inside of our digital landscape, whether it's a financial transaction or a medical record, the accuracy of that data will be critically important. Now, if our data integrity is maintained, this helps to ensure the decisions that are being made based on correct information, and the outcomes are what we expect them to be. Second, we want to maintain trust, both with our users and with our systems and networks. If users can't trust the data or information they're receiving, they simply won't trust your systems or networks. For example, if you logged into your bank account today and saw that it's been compromised, and now your bank account says $1,052.43 instead of the $10,524.30 you thought you had because the attacker altered your transaction history and removed a zero, you would no longer trust your bank with your money. After all they did was simply remove that one trailing zero from the account balance, and now you've lost $9,471.87, right? I know if this happened to my bank account, my trust in that bank would be immediately shattered, and I would be looking for a new bank to take my business to. Third, we have system operability. After all, if the data is corrupted, then our systems are going to malfunction, and this can lead to unexpected behaviors or system downtimes that are going to affect our business's operations. So, a breach of integrity could cause our systems to crash or become unresponsive if the data format is altered without authorization or consent. Now, in order to help us maintain the integrity of our data, our systems, and our networks, we're going to utilize 5 methods. These are hashing, digital signatures, checksums, access controls, and regular audits. First, we have hashing. Hashing is the process of converting data into a fixed size value. This way, even if a small part of the original data changes, the hash value will change dramatically, and this will indicate that there was some kind of tampering that occurred to the data. This unpredictability and sensitivity to data changes makes hashing an invaluable tool in verifying data integrity, because any minor alteration will result in a vastly different hash. Essentially, the results of this hashing function is called a hash digest, and this hash digest will almost serve like a digital fingerprint for any given piece of data to prove its integrity. Second, we have digital signatures. Now, digital signatures use encryption to ensure both integrity and authenticity. To digitally sign a file, that file is first going to be hashed, and then that resulting hash digest will be encrypted using the user's private key. Now, this data is now digitally signed, and any alterations to the file will drastically change the file's hash, which in turn would invalidate that digital signature. This immediately lets us know that the data or file has been changed from its original format, and therefore integrity has been compromised. Third, we have checksums. Now, checksums are a method to verify the integrity of data being sent through a transmission. By comparing the sender's checksum of that transmitted data with the receiver's calculated checksum for the received data, we can determine if any unintended changes in the data have been created. Basically, when data is sent from one location to another, the checksum is also going to be sent along with it. Upon receipt, the recipient can compute a new checksum for the received data and compare it to the provided checksum that was sent over the network. If those two values match, this indicates the data has not been tampered with during the transmission and therefore integrity has been maintained. However, if those values are different, this suggests some kind of alteration or corruption has happened to that data and integrity has been breached. Fourth, we have access controls. Now, access controls ensure that only authorized individuals can modify data, and this reduces the risk of unintentional or malicious alterations. By setting up stringent permissions, organizations can ensure that only authorized individuals have the capability to modify their data. This not only prevents outsiders from tampering with the information, but also restricts internal users to their respective roles, and therefore significantly reduces the risk of both unintentional mistakes and malicious alterations. Now, fifth and finally, we have regular audits. Regular audits involve systematically reviewing your logs and operations to ensure that only authorized changes are being made and any discrepancies are immediately addressed. By performing regular audits, we can detect if any changes to the system or its configurations have been occurring that might affect our data or system's integrity. So remember, integrity ensures our data remains consistent, accurate, and trustworthy throughout its lifecycle. Methods like hashing, digital signatures, checksums, access control, and regular audits are really your go-to tools for ensuring that the information maintains its integrity by remaining unaltered from its original format. It's also important to associate the terms integrity and hashing together because hashing is probably the #1 way that you're going to see the maintenance of integrity for all of our data, our software, our systems, and our networks out in the real world. In an era where data drives so many of our business decisions, maintaining data integrity is not just a good practice, it's necessary for maintaining trust and smooth operations within your organization. In this lesson, we're going to cover availability. Now, availability in information security is used to ensure that information, systems, and resources are accessible and operational when needed by authorized users. In simpler terms, availability is all about making sure that services, systems, and data are always available when they're supposed to be. Let's pretend for a moment that you have an important online meeting scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow, but just minutes before that, your internet connection goes down. This would be super frustrating for you, and now you're not going to be able to attend the meeting, right? Well, this situation emphasizes the importance of availability in our increasingly connected world. Just as you'd want your internet to always be up and running, especially during critical times, in that same vein, businesses need their systems and services to be available around the clock to meet their customer demands and to maintain their brand's reputation. When you're considering which system or service provider to use, you're often going to hear them refer to their availability status by a number of nines that they can provide. For example, 3 nines of availability equates to 99.9% uptime. This means that in a standard calendar year with 365 days, we have 8,760 hours available. So, a system with 99.9% uptime can be down for a maximum of 8.76 hours. If that's too much downtime for you though, you can actually go and find a provider who has more nines of availability. For example, I used to work for a service provider that had to maintain 5 nines of availability. Now, 5 nines is considered to be the gold standard, and this means we have to achieve a system uptime of 99.999%. Now, if you translate this into minutes or hours, this actually means that our system has to guarantee that we are going to have a downtime of no more than 5.26 minutes in any given calendar year. Achieving this gold standard of availability ensures that services and applications are virtually always going to be accessible to our users, and it minimizes disruptions and potential revenue loss events. To put this into perspective, while a 99% uptime may seem high, it still allows you to have over 3.5 days of downtime per year, whereas the 5 nines of availability slashes that down to a mere 5 minutes. This level of reliability means we're going to have a robust infrastructure, proactive monitoring, redundancy measures, and swift disaster recovery mechanisms in order to achieve 5 nines of availability. Now, as cybersecurity professionals, we do value availability because it helps us to ensure business continuity, to maintain our customer trust, and to uphold our organization's reputation. Now, first, we need to talk about ensuring business continuity. Every minute your system is down, your business might be facing significant losses. For an e-commerce site, this can mean a direct loss in sales. For a hospital, it could mean a life-threatening situation if a critical system isn't operational. For example, in the telecommunications industry, a single hour of downtime can cost them, on average, $2 million. That means that for every minute of downtime, they are losing about $33,000 per minute. Second, we have maintaining customer trust. Now, if customers can't access their accounts, purchase their products, or use services because your system is down, their trust in your company is going to go down. If you suffer from a prolonged unavailability event, this can actually cause your customers to look for alternative solutions and purchase products or services from your competitors, causing you to lose revenue. Third and finally, we have upholding your organization's reputation. Now, if you have repeated downtime events, this is not only going to affect your business operations, but also tarnishes your organization's image in the long run, and this will make it more challenging to regain those customers' confidence in your organizations if they leave you for another provider. Now, in order to overcome the challenges associated with maintaining high levels of availability, the best strategy is to use redundancy in all of your systems and network designs. Now, redundancy is the duplication of critical components or functions of a system with the intention of enhancing its reliability. In simple words, it's about having backup options to ensure uninterrupted service. If one of your systems fails, the backup should take over, ensuring constant availability. Think of it as having a spare tire in your car. If one tire gets punctured, you're able to go out and immediately replace it with your spare and continue your journey without a significant delay. For example, I used to live on the island of Puerto Rico, and down there we often face hurricanes and other natural disasters that could affect our business operations. Now, to overcome the threat of losing internet at my office, I actually had 3 different internet connections. One was from a dedicated microwave wireless service provider, one was a connection from my local cable company, and one was provided by a cellular modem. Now, if the microwave link went down, then our systems automatically switched over to the cable modem. If the cable modem also went down, we would switch over to the cellular modem. This way, regardless of what kind of outage occurred, we had redundancy in place to maintain the continuity of our operations. Now, there are various types of redundancy that you need to consider when you're designing your systems and your networks. This includes server redundancy, data redundancy, network redundancy, and power redundancy. First, we have server redundancy. Server redundancy involves using multiple servers in a load balance or failover configuration so that if one of those is overloaded or fails, the other servers can take over the load and continue to support your users. Second, we have data redundancy. Data redundancy involves storing data in multiple places. This way, if one storage site fails, the data can still be accessed from another location. Often, we achieve this locally using RAIDs or using a hybrid of on-premise and cloud-based backup systems. Third, we have network redundancy. Now, network redundancy ensures that if one network path fails, the data can still travel through another route. This is how I set up my old offices in Puerto Rico, so that if the microwave link went down, we switched over to cable. If the cable went down, we switched over to cellular, and this way, we could continue providing network connectivity to all of our users. Fourth and finally, we have power redundancy. Power redundancy involves using backup power sources like generators and uninterrupted power supply systems to ensure that your organization systems remain operational even during periods of power disruption or outages within your local service area. So remember, availability is used to ensure that the data and systems are always ready for use when they're needed. The principle of redundancy plays a pivotal role in guaranteeing this uninterrupted service and achieving your higher levels of availability, so you should associate the term availability with redundancy because they go hand in hand. In a world where time is money and every second is going to count, ensuring the constant availability of your services is not just beneficial, it's imperative for your organization's continued success in this digital age. In this lesson, we're going to cover non-repudiation. Now, non-repudiation in cybersecurity is focused on providing undeniable proof in the world of digital transactions. Non-repudiation is a security measure that ensures individuals or entities involved in a communication or transaction cannot deny their participation or the authenticity of their actions. I like to think about this as the difference between sending a standard letter in the mail and sending one that requires a signed receipt upon delivery. The receiver's signature on the receipt tells us that the recipient can't deny that they have received that letter. In fact, non-repudiation has been used for centuries, even before computers were even developed or thought of. If we look back a few hundred years or more, kings and noblemen used to use signet rings to imprint their unique seal onto a wax on a document to make sure it was sealed. This seal acted as a form of non-repudiation. If a decree or letter bore that king's seal, it was undeniable evidence that it was authentic and it came from the king himself. Now, anyone receiving this sealed document could be confident of who sent it because only the king or that noble person had that specific signet ring. So they couldn't claim that the contents of the document were not written by that person. Hopefully, this medieval example does help you to underscore the importance and timeless nature of ensuring authenticity and accountability in all of our communications and transactions because that is what non-repudiation is all about. Now, let's move back into the digital world, and we don't use signet rings here, but instead we use something that is more modern. This is a digital signature. Now, a digital signature, much like the king's signet ring, is considered to be unique to each user who's operating within the digital domain. A digital signature is created by first hashing a particular message or communication that you want to digitally sign, and then it encrypts that hash digest with the user's private key using asymmetric encryption. This allows the digital signature to ensure that a piece of information, whether it's an email or a transaction, originated from a stated source and hasn't been altered during its transit. If someone attempts to refute their involvement in the digitally signed transaction, the signature serves as undeniable proof that they actually sent that, and the integrity of that transaction hasn't been changed since they used their private key to create that digital signature, and that digital signature is made up of an encrypted hash digest. Now, non-repudiation is important for 3 main reasons. We use it to confirm the authenticity of digital transactions, we use it to ensure the integrity of critical communications, and we use it to provide accountability in digital processes. First, we have confirming the authenticity of digital transactions. In the digital world, impersonation and identity theft is so much easier to perform than it was in person. So it really is important that a system has the capability to guarantee a transaction or communication's authenticity is there to ensure that your users can't state they didn't perform a certain action. So if I send a digitally signed email to my stockbroker asking him to sell 100% of my shares, he can be assured that it was really me who sent it because I digitally signed it. But if he receives an email from me that is not digitally signed, there is no assurance that I actually sent it. After all, you could go out right now and sign up for a free email account like jasondion@yahoo.com or jasondion@gmail.com and pretend to be somebody else pretty easily, but you really can't fake their digital signature because only they have their private key that's going to be used inside of that digital signature. Second, we have ensuring integrity. With non-repudiation measures in place, all the parties involved can trust that the messages haven't been tampered with because any alteration would break the chain of undeniable proof. Since non-repudiation relies on digital signatures, and digital signatures have hash values in them, these digital signatures are used to ensure not just non-repudiation, but also integrity. And third and finally, we have providing accountability. When every action has a digital stamp of authenticity attached to it, we can create a sense of responsibility and accountability among our users because they know that their actions can be traced back to them without denial. For example, some auto insurance companies now have the option for people to use an app on their smartphone that will feed their real-time driving data back to the insurance company. If you agree to use that tracking app, it will tell the insurance company how fast you drive, how quickly you change lanes, how long you wait to brake for a stop sign, and things like that. In return for allowing them to collect this data, you can get a potential discount on your auto insurance if you drive within their safe driving profiles. For many drivers, opting into this app will provide them with accountability and remind them to drive more safely. And because the app is installed on your smartphone, the company knows it's you who's driving, and this provides non-repudiation since you can unlock the phone using your face or fingerprint to activate this app every time you log in and start a new drive. So remember, non-repudiation is about ensuring undeniable proof of your participation in a digital interaction. When you think about non-repudiation, I want you to think about the fact that someone cannot say they didn't do something because you have a method to prove that they did. The best tool for achieving non-repudiation really is digital signatures, so if you hear the word non-repudiation, immediately I want you to start thinking about digital signatures to achieve a level of trustworthiness. In the digital landscape where trust is paramount, non-repudiation does stand out as a beacon of authenticity, accountability, and assurance for all of our digital transactions and messages. In this lesson, we're going to cover authentication. Authentication in cybersecurity is a security measure that ensures individuals or entities are who they claim to be during a communication or transaction. Basically, authentication focuses on verifying the identity of individuals or entities participating inside of a digital interaction. Now, let's pretend you just walked out to the mailbox and you received 2 different letters. One of those letters was sent from an anonymous sender, and it claims that you owe $1,000 for a new laptop that you don't remember buying. The other one is from your country's tax collection agency, like the IRS here in the United States, stating that you owe them $1,000 in unpaid taxes for the last year. Now, as you examine the IRS letter, you see something on it, like the official stamp, your real social security number, and other identifying information, as well as a field in the form letter that states how much and exactly when you paid your last tax bill. Now, which of these 2 letters are you going to trust more? Now, if you're like most people, you're simply going to throw away that anonymous letter for the $1,000 laptop bill. Instead, you're going to take that tax collection letter a lot more seriously because it passes your authentication test. Now, in today's digital environment, we don't just use images or seals to determine if somebody is who they say they are, because that can be easily spoofed online. But instead, we want to conduct identity verification using various forms of authentication. These days, we have 5 commonly used authentication methods. We refer to these as something you know, something you have, something you are, something you do, and somewhere you are. Now, first, you have something you know. Something you know is also called a knowledge factor, and it relies on information that you as a user can recall. Typically, this will be a secret word or phrase or a password known only to you. The most common type of knowledge factor is a username and password combination because it's something you remember and you're prompted to enter it every time you log into a system. Now, second, we have something you have. Something you have is also known as a possession factor, and this relies on the user presenting a physical item to authenticate themselves. If you've ever worked in a large office building, you may have been asked to present your employee identification badge to a security guard for verification whenever you try to enter the building. This is a good example of something you have or a possession factor. Another good example of this is when a website sends you a one-time text message code over to your smartphone that you're going to type in during the login process, because in theory, only you have possession of your smartphone, so your smartphone acts as a possession factor. Third, we have something you are. Now, something you are is also known as an inheritance factor. This relies on the user providing a unique physical or behavioral characteristic of the person to validate they are who they claim to be. Often, you'll hear this referred to as biometric authentication. For example, I use facial recognition every day to unlock my iPhone when I want to use it. Or, I use my index finger to unlock my MacBook Pro using the embedded fingerprint reader on my laptop instead of typing in a username and password. Fourth, we have something you do. Now, something you do is also known as an action factor, and it relies on the user conducting a unique action to prove who they are. For example, when I was a kid, my friends and I had a secret handshake that we could use to verify that we were part of Jason's clubhouse and we were the ones who were allowed to use our club's treehouse. Similarly, I've worked in organizations that use handwriting samples or an analysis of how you're walking to determine if you're authorized to perform a certain action. Fifth, we have somewhere you are. Somewhere you are, also known as a location factor, relies on the user being in a certain geographic location before they're granted access to a system. For example, when my kids were younger, we used to have geofencing set up on their phones to provide them with a way to unlock our front door using their smartphones. But it would only work if they were within 20 feet of our house because we didn't want them inadvertently unlocking the door if they were sitting a few miles away at their friend's house. Similarly, many companies use location-based factors to allow or deny access to their critical applications. I worked at one organization that would only allow me to use certain functions on my smartphone if I was inside the United States. But as soon as I left the United States, a lot of those functions would be blocked to protect the security of the data on my device. Now, each of these 5 factors can be used by themselves, but you can also combine 2 or more of them together to create what's known as a multi-factor authentication system. If you have 2 of these, we call this 2FA or two-factor authentication. If you have 2 or more of these, we can also call this MFA or multi-factor authentication. Now, MFA or a multi-factor authentication system is a security process that requires users to provide multiple methods of identification to verify their identity. This approach ensures that even if one factor is compromised, like a stolen username or password, that the attacker can still not gain access because they need a second factor, such as a hardware token, a one-time text message code, a fingerprint, a facial recognition scan, or something else like that. Now, authentication is critical to understand because it's going to be used to prevent unauthorized access, to provide user data and privacy, and to ensure the resources are being accessed by valid users only. First, we need to talk about authentication being used to prevent unauthorized access. Given the increasing number of digital threats out there, it is truly imperative that we ensure that only authorized individuals are accessing our organization's system and data. By creating a solid authentication model within your organization, your systems can effectively keep out impersonators or malicious actors out of your network. Just consider your online bank account. If it didn't have stringent authentication standards, then anybody could log into your account and steal your money. But by using the proper authentication mechanisms, we can greatly reduce the risk of this occurring. Second, we use authentication to protect our user data and privacy. By verifying users' identities before granting them access, platforms and other websites can ensure that personal and sensitive data is only being shown to the rightful owners or authorized individuals. For example, your health and medical records are usually encrypted and stored within a patient portal, and you want to ensure that only you and your doctors can access that and view your health information within that system to protect your privacy. Third and finally, we have the use of authentication to ensure resource validity. Now, in the digital realm, where resources like cloud storage and network bandwidth are considered to be shared resources, it becomes truly essential to ensure that only valid, authenticated users can consume those resources. So remember, when it comes to authentication, it really is a means to verify the identity of users or entities inside of your digital interactions. There are many different tools and factors that we can use to achieve robust levels of authentication, including knowledge factors, possession factors, inherence factors, action factors, and location factors. But at its core, authentication ensures that individuals are who they claim to be and grants them access and privileges that they're going to be entitled to. In a digital world where identity and access management are paramount, authentication is standing there as a security guard to ensure the security, privacy, and proper access of your data and resources is being achieved across the organization. In this lesson, we're going to cover authorization. Authorization in cybersecurity pertains to the permissions and privileges that are granted to users or entities after they've been authenticated. While authentication is all about verifying the identity, authorization is all about determining what that identity is allowed to do within a given system. Think of it as the difference between entering a secure building with an access card, which is your way of being authenticated, and being allowed to enter a specific room or floor within that building, which is where you're being authorized to enter. This concept of who is allowed inside and who is kept out has been an integral part of societal structures for centuries. For example, in today's digital world, almost everyone has the right permissions to access a social media platform, but only a few select users, like system administrators or content moderators, have the rights to access the backend systems or the underlying user data. This selective access ensures that only those with the necessary permissions can enter the more sensitive or restricted portions of that website or platform. So, while many users might have access to a given system or application, their roles within that system will be determining the actions that they can perform, the data they can view or modify, and the areas they can access. Now, authorization mechanisms range from role-based to rule-based to attribute-based controls in order to determine what permissions each user is going to be given. Authorization mechanisms are important for us to protect our sensitive data, to maintain our system integrity, and to streamline the user experience too. First, let's talk about authorization in order to protect our sensitive data. By controlling who can access what, authorization ensures that sensitive or confidential data is accessible only to those with the proper clearance. Let's consider a network used by a hospital system. While a nurse might have access to the patient's vitals, only specific doctors or specialists might be authorized to alter treatment plans or prescribe medication using that system. As a patient, we may only be allowed to view some of the information from our records, but we may be prevented from reading the doctor's personal notes in our medical records as well because we're not authorized to do that. Second, we use authorization to maintain the system integrity inside of our organizations. Authorization can help prevent accidental or deliberate system misconfigurations or data alterations by only providing the ability to change those things to well-trained and experienced system administrators. For example, at my company, several of us are able to view financial reports for the company, but only a few people, like our accountants or financial officers, are authorized to input any transactions or to make changes to the existing data in our accounting software. Third and finally, we use authorization to create more streamlined user experiences. By providing users with only the options and data relevant to their role, systems can offer a more streamlined and user-friendly experience. For example, since you're a student in this course, you can see the course drastically differently than I do as an instructor. This is because I have additional access rights that you simply don't have, like the ability to upload new videos, edit the quiz questions, add new practice exam questions, and things like that. On the other hand, since you're a student, you can take those quizzes and practice exams using an interactive environment that I, as the instructor, simply don't have access to. So remember, when you think about authorization, I want you to envision it as a set of rules and policies that are used to dictate what actions users or entities can perform once their identity is verified. It's the system's way of saying, now that I know who you are, here's what you're allowed to do. In a digital environment where data protection and system integrity are paramount, authorization is going to serve as our gatekeeper to ensure that the right people have the right access for the right things. In this lesson, we're going to cover accounting. Now, accounting in cybersecurity is a security measure that ensures all user activities during a communication or transaction are properly tracked and recorded. Essentially, accounting focuses on monitoring and logging the actions of users or entities during their digital interactions. Let's imagine you just received two different bank statements from your online bank. The first one states that you spent $1,000 last month, but they didn't provide any details on the specific transaction dates, times, locations, or amounts. Your second statement, though, came with a complete transaction log showcasing every deposit, withdrawal, and purchase that you've made over the last 30 days with their associated dates, times, locations, and amounts. Now, which of these two bank statements would give you more confidence and clarity about your financial activity over the last month? Well, if you're like most people, you probably prefer the second bank statement with all the supporting details, because now you know exactly what happened and where. This gives you more trust in the validity of this bank statement too, because it provides more transparency, security, and accountability. This is exactly what we're aiming to achieve by utilizing accounting inside of our organizations. You see, accounting isn't just about keeping tabs on your money. It's about monitoring and logging every action that a user makes within a given system. These actions can include things like logging into the system, accessing files, modifying configuration settings, downloading or installing software, or even attempting unauthorized actions across the organization's systems and networks. Your organization should use a robust accounting system so that you can create an audit trail, maintain regulatory compliance, conduct forensic analysis, perform resource optimization, and achieve user accountability. First, we have an audit trail. Now, an accounting system is used to create an audit trail that provides a chronological record of all of your user activities that can be used to trace any changes, unauthorized access, or anomalies back to a specific user or point in time. Second, we have regulatory compliance. Now, many industries and countries have strict regulations regarding data protection and privacy. By using an effective accounting system, we can ensure that our organizations are adhering to these regulations by maintaining a comprehensive record of all of their users' activities. Third, we have forensic analysis. In the unfortunate event of a security breach, a detailed accounting and event log can help our cybersecurity experts understand exactly what happened, how it happened, and how to prevent similar incidents from occurring again in the future. Fourth, we have resource optimization. By tracking which resources, like bandwidth or cloud storage, are being utilized and by whom, organizations can make more informed decisions on resource allocation to ensure that system performance is being optimized and your costs are being minimized. Fifth and finally, we have user accountability. With a thorough accounting system in place, users will know that their actions are being monitored and logged, which in turn can also deter potential misuse and ensure adherence with your organization's cybersecurity policies. Now, to perform accounting, we're usually going to use different technologies like syslog servers, network analysis tools, and security information and event management systems known as a SIEM. Syslog servers are going to be used to aggregate logs from across various network devices and systems so that system administrators can analyze them to detect patterns or anomalies in the organization's systems. Network analyzers like Wireshark can be used to capture and analyze network traffic so that network administrators can gain detailed insights into all the data moving across their network. And a security information and event management system, known as a SIEM, will provide us with a real-time analysis of our security alerts that are generated by various hardware and software infrastructure pieces inside of our organization. So remember, accounting is used to ensure that every action within a system is tracked and recorded. This meticulous record-keeping provides transparency, enables regulatory compliance, aids in forensic analysis, ensures resource optimization, and holds users accountable for their actions. Just as you'd want a detailed statement of your bank transactions to ensure financial transparency in the digital world, accounting stands as a testament to a system's integrity and security. It's a pivotal component of security, and it's used to ensure that every transaction and every interaction is transparent, traceable, and trustworthy. In this lesson, we're going to dive into security control categories. Now, when we discuss securing an organization, it's not just about all the technical solutions like fancy firewalls or encryption techniques. But instead, security is a multifaceted domain, and understanding how different controls fit into the big picture is crucial to your success as a cybersecurity professional. Now, think of your organization's network and systems as a medieval castle. While all the walls are important, you also need things like watchtowers for surveillance, guards with plans, which are operational procedures, and a leader of the city watch who has the strategy. The castle walls may be your primary defense, like a technical control like a firewall might be in your organizational network. But it's also important to consider all the other control categories that you can use, such as the watchtowers to provide surveillance, which is a form of physical controls, the guards with plans, which are operational controls, and the leader of the city watch with the overall strategy, which is a managerial control. As you can see, we like to layer our controls across multiple categories to give us a more well-protected network overall. To do this, we use security controls spread across 4 broad categories. These are technical controls, managerial controls, operational controls, and physical controls. And each of these plays a pivotal role in a holistic approach to your cybersecurity. First, let's talk about technical controls. Technical controls are the technologies, hardware, and software mechanisms that are implemented to manage and reduce risk. They operate within the system's technology layer. For example, you may want to install antivirus software on your system as a form of technical control. That way, whenever you download a questionable file, the software will spring into action, scan that file for potential threats, and then quarantine it if it's deemed harmful. This is a technical control in action that provides an automated response that's governed by the system itself. Other examples of technical controls include things like firewalls, encryption processes, and intrusion detection systems. Essentially, if it's a tool or a piece of software that can automatically protect your system integrity, confidentiality, or availability, we're going to classify it underneath the category of technical controls. Second, we have managerial controls. Now, managerial controls are sometimes also referred to as administrative controls, and they involve the strategic planning and governance side of security. These managerial controls ensure that the organization's security strategies align with its business goals and its risk tolerance. So let's pretend that an organization wants to adopt a cloud storage solution. Before they make the jump into the cloud, the managerial team is going to conduct a risk assessment to understand the potential vulnerabilities and assess whether the move into the cloud will align with the company's broader risk strategy. Beyond risk assessments, managerial controls also encompass security policies, training programs, and incident response strategies. These managerial controls are really all about making informed decisions and ensuring that the entire organization is on the same security page. Third, we have operational controls. Now, operational controls are the procedures and measures that are designed to protect data on a day-to-day basis, and they're mainly governed by internal processes and human actions. For example, if your organization requires that you change your password every 90 days, this would be considered an operational control. This operational control ensures that even if a password was compromised, its shelf life would be limited, so its potential harm that it could cause is going to be drastically reduced. Operational controls cover a vast area, including backup procedures, account reviews, and user awareness training programs. These controls also ensure that security remains active and it becomes an ongoing process to continually adapt to meeting our evolving challenges and security threats. Fourth, we have physical controls. Now, physical controls relate to the tangible, real-world measures taken to protect assets. These controls exist outside of the digital realm, but they are crucial in safeguarding both digital and non-digital assets. If you think about a large data center, these facilities house our critical servers and our infrastructure, and they often have multiple layers of physical security. From surveillance cameras and biometric scanners to reinforced doors and even barbed wire fences, these controls are designed to prevent unauthorized physical access. Other physical controls include things like secure shredding of sensitive documents, the use of security guards, or even simply locking the doors to your office whenever you leave the room. Physical controls are used to protect not only external threats, but also internal threats to ensure that only authorized personnel can access certain areas or assets. So remember, security is not just about being tech-savvy, it's about appreciating the multifaceted layers of protection that come together to form a robust security posture. Whether it's the technology guarding against cyber threats, the managerial strategy steering the ship, the day-to-day operational procedures, or the physical barriers that keep our assets safe, each category does play a pivotal role. Just like a castle relying on its walls, watchtowers, strategy, and guards to remain secure, our organizations must implement technical, managerial, operational, and physical controls to defend against a wide variety of cybersecurity threats. In this lesson, we're going to discuss the various types of security controls. Just as a skilled doctor uses different treatments depending on the nature and stage of an illness, security professionals implement various controls depending on the specific threats and vulnerabilities that they're addressing. To protect an organization effectively, it's essential to understand the details of each control type and when it's most appropriate to use each one of them. Now, there are 6 basic types of security controls: preventative controls, deterrent controls, detective controls, corrective controls, compensating controls, and directive controls. First, we have preventative controls. Preventative controls are proactive measures implemented to thwart potential security threats or breaches. These preventative controls aim to fortify your systems before an incident actually occurs. For example, a firewall is typically considered a preventative control since it can filter incoming and outgoing traffic to block any potentially harmful data packets before they penetrate your organization's network. Second, we have deterrent controls. Now, deterrent controls are aimed to discourage potential attackers by making the effort seem less appealing or more challenging. For example, at my house, we have a home burglar alarm system, and the company installed some signs outside to warn people that we have surveillance cameras and a monitored alarm system at the house. The whole idea here is to warn the bad actors out there that somebody is watching, so you may want to go break into somebody else's house that doesn't have these security controls in place. Now, in this example, the signs are the deterrent control, not the actual alarm system or cameras. Remember, warning signs or banners can be installed on your websites to indicate that monitoring is occurring, and this can help deter potential attackers from targeting your website too. These signals convey the message that illicit activities will be noticed and they could lead to potential negative repercussions for that attacker because you're going to prosecute them. Third, we have detective controls. Now, detective controls monitor and alert organizations to malicious activities as they occur or shortly thereafter. Their primary goal here is detection and notification. For example, the security cameras that are monitoring my home are considered to be detective controls. Yes, you could still break into my house. The cameras aren't going to stop you, but I'm now going to know that you broke in and I know who broke in because I can review the video recordings and show them to the police so we can then arrest you and put you in jail for breaking into my home. Similarly, in our networks, we use an intrusion detection system known as an IDS to constantly scan our network traffic for suspicious activity. If something unusual is detected, such as an unexpected data spike, then the IDS will notify us as system administrators that something is suspicious and needs to be investigated. This makes an intrusion detection system a detective control. Fourth, we have corrective controls. Now, once a threat has been detected using a detective control, we can then use a corrective control to mitigate any potential damage and restore our systems to their normal states. For example, if your organization is infected by malware, your antivirus software is going to be used not only to detect that malicious software, but it can also quarantine and remove that malware. Now, when it's used to detect the malware, it's a detective control. But as soon as it starts doing quarantine and removal, now it is a corrective control. So sometimes you have things that actually are placed in multiple categories, even though it's a single tool. Fifth, we have compensating controls. Now, compensating controls are alternative measures that are implemented when primary security controls are simply not feasible or effective. These compensating controls ensure that protection remains intact even if the ideal control is not in place. For example, you may be running a legacy system that simply can't support the latest form of wireless encryption known as WPA3. In this case, you might instead choose to implement WPA2 and use a VPN on top of that from your endpoint to your internal servers to act as a compensating control. Now, this isn't as good as the perfect solution of using WPA3, but since you can only use WPA2 due to your legacy systems, you can add a compensating control by implementing that VPN on top of that WPA2 connection to mitigate potential vulnerabilities inside of the WPA2 encryption schema, and this will give you higher levels of data security. Sixth, we have directive controls. Now, directive controls are going to guide, inform, or mandate different actions. These directive controls are often rooted in policy or documentation, and they set the standards for behavior within your organization. For example, your organization's acceptable use policy, known as an AUP, is considered a directive control that provides guidelines on how employees are permitted to use company-owned IT assets. Most of the time, if you're asked about a policy, you're going to be able to categorize this under the term directive control. So remember, effective security is created by selecting the right controls across a wide range of categories, including preventative, deterrent, detective, corrective, compensating, and directive controls. Each control type helps to complement the other ones and create a higher level of overall security. Preventative controls build our foundation, deterrent controls discourage threats, detective controls keep a watchful eye, corrective controls jump in during emergencies, compensating controls offer backups and mitigations, and directive controls guide the entire process. As you navigate through the world of cybersecurity, your understanding of these roles and the importance of each type of security control will enable you to craft a more balanced and robust security strategy. Whether stopping threats in their tracks or swiftly responding to breaches, each control type is a piece of the larger puzzle that ensures our organizations maintain the security and resilience of their systems and networks. Always focused on using a strong perimeter defense, much like an old castle has strong walls and a moat around it to keep threat actors out of that castle. Now the problem is that these old school strategies, while they were effective in the past, are no match for modern networks. After all, castles were the pinnacle of security about 1,000 years ago, but these days, I can simply fly a drone or a helicopter over that moat and the castle walls are not going to be able to stop me from attacking the people who think they're safe inside those castle walls. Well, this is exactly how most computer networks were secured over the past few decades. Cybersecurity experts would configure these networks with strong external defenses by using things like firewalls, intrusion protection systems, and other perimeter defenses. But these days, many of our network devices are pretty deperimeterized. Now instead, we have to protect our systems and the data using multiple levels of encryption, secure protocols, data level authentication, and other host-based protection mechanisms. From an operational perspective, people love this deperimeterization because it allows us to reduce our costs, conduct business-to-business transactions from anywhere in the world, and become an increasingly more agile organization. The move to the cloud, when combined with the rise of work from home, has also rapidly increased our ability to conduct secure operations within this type of deperimeterization architecture. Now, deperimeterization has occurred due to the migration into the cloud, the increase in remote work, people embracing mobile technologies along with rapid adoption and use of wireless networks, as well as a larger movement toward outsourcing and contracting. But this is a deperimeterization movement that does introduce a lot of risk to our organizations as well if we're not careful. So, to protect these deperimeterized networks, we can't rely simply on boundary or perimeter defenses anymore. And instead, we need to implement a best practice known as zero trust to ensure the security of our corporate networks and our corporate data. In our traditional networks, we used to believe that our networks and our users were trusted because we gave them access to our data. But under a zero trust model, that is simply not the case, and this is considered a really good thing in terms of modern security. You may have heard the saying, trust but verify, which was made famous by President Ronald Reagan back in the 1980s. But we as cybersecurity professionals like to take this a step further when we implement zero trust. And instead, we quote our favorite mantra, which is trust nothing and verify everything. And that really does sum up the entire architecture concept behind a zero trust system. With zero trust, we have to demand verification for every device, every user, and every transaction within the network, regardless of its origin. This means that whether a user is attempting to access a system from within the organization's physical office or they're trying to connect remotely, their identity and permissions are always going to be verified. This methodology will address the changing nature of work and digital landscapes while acknowledging that the threats can emerge from both inside or outside of your organizational network. Now, to create a zero trust architecture, we need to use two different planes, the control plane and the data plane. The control plane lays out the policies and procedures, and the data plane is going to ensure that these policies are properly executed. The control plane refers to the overarching framework and set of components responsible for defining, managing, and enforcing the policies that are related to the user and system access within an organization. It provides a centralized way to dictate and control how, when, and where access is going to be granted to ensure that only authenticated and authorized entities can access specific resources. The control plane typically encompasses several key elements, including adaptive identity, threat scope reduction, policy-driven access control, and secured zones. First, we have adaptive identity. In Zero Trust, we assume that static, one-time verifications are no longer sufficient, so we have to use adaptive identities that rely on real-time validation that takes into account the user's behavior, device, location, and more. By continuously addressing these variables, our user identities are constantly adjusting and adapting to the environment in order to grant or restrict access as necessary. Second, we have threat scope reduction. In Zero Trust, we want to limit the user's access to only what they need for their work tasks because this drastically reduces the network's potential attack surface. This approach is focused on minimizing the blast radius that could occur in the event of a breach, and it ensures that the compromised credentials will not allow attackers to have unimpeded access throughout your entire system or network. Third, we have policy-driven access control. Now, the policy-driven access control is going to entail developing, managing, and enforcing user access policies based on their roles and responsibilities. By defining clear policies, organizations ensure that users can only access data pertinent to their role in order to reduce the potential for a successful data breach against your organization. Fourth, we have secured zones. Now, secured zones are isolated environments within a network that are designed to house sensitive data. Only users with the appropriate permissions can access these zones to ensure a further layer of protection. The control plane will use a policy engine and a policy administrator to make decisions about access. Once the subject's identity is verified, the policy engine cross-references the access request with its predefined policies. Think about the policy engine like a rulebook that's going to be determining whether the request aligns with the subject's permissions. The policy administrator is used to establish and manage the access policies. This is where the entity that dictates who gets access to what and ensures that the policies are aligning with the organization's security protocols and business objectives. The data plane consists of the subject or system and the policy enforcement point. First, we have the subject or system. The subject or system is going to refer to the individual or entity that's attempting to gain access. This could be an employee, a workstation, or even a software application. The primary objective is to verify the authenticity of the subject or system before granting it access to your sensitive data or systems. Then we have the policy enforcement point. The policy enforcement point is the final step inside of this process. This is where the decision to grant or deny access is actually being done and executed. Based on the verification from the subject or system and the policy engine's determination, the policy enforcement point is then going to allow or restrict access to effectively act as a gatekeeper to the sensitive areas of your networks or systems. So remember, Zero Trust is a cybersecurity approach that assumes no user or system is to be trusted by default and requires continuous verification for access to your organizational resources, regardless of the location or origin of the network request. Zero Trust is more than just a security trend, though. It really is an acknowledgement from the cybersecurity community at large that we are facing an ever-evolving digital landscape where threats can come from outside or inside of your networks. While traditional perimeter-based defenses still hold some value and should be used, they are increasingly insufficient if they're used solely by themselves to protect the perimeter of your network. So, as we navigate an age of remote work, cloud computing, and an ever-increasing array of devices, Zero Trust principles offer us a roadmap to more robust and adaptable security postures. By integrating the strategies of control and data planes, organizations can proactively defend against threats by recognizing that trust is a commodity that must be earned, verified, and continuously reassessed at every enforcement point within your network. In this lesson, we're going to discuss the concept of a gap analysis. Now, a gap analysis is a process of evaluating the differences between an organization's current performance and its desired performance. The goal of the analysis is to identify areas where improvements can be made in order to bridge the gap between the current and desired states. Conducting a gap analysis can be a really valuable tool for organizations that are looking to improve their operations, processes, performance, or overall cybersecurity posture. Now, there are several steps involved in conducting a gap analysis. The first step is to define the scope of the analysis. This includes identifying the specific areas of the organization that will be evaluated and the desired outcome of that analysis. The next step is to gather data on the current state of the organization. This can be done through surveys, interviews, or other forms of data collection. Once that data has been gathered, it should be analyzed to identify any areas where the organization's current performance falls short of its desired performance. Once those gaps have been identified, our next step is to develop a plan to bridge those gaps. This can include changes to processes, systems, or other areas of the organization that can help to improve the performance or security of your systems and networks. The plan should also include specific goals and objectives, as well as a timeline for achieving them. For example, if a company wanted to migrate their data storage from their on-premise solution to a cloud-based solution, they should consider how this might affect their security. To ensure a smooth and secure transition, your company might perform a comprehensive gap analysis. This might begin by evaluating your on-premise security measures, which includes your firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and data access controls. After documenting this current state, you can then compare it to the desired security standards for their chosen cloud provider, which might be AWS or Azure. Then, the gap analysis can be used to highlight that their existing data encryption methods are outdated, and they're not in line with the cloud's more advanced encryption at rest protocols. Additionally, their on-premise access controls might not be able to be mapped directly to the cloud's identity and access management or IAM models, so this is a gap that also needs to be addressed. Now that the company knows their current state, their desired state, and the difference between the two, they are now better equipped to plan their migration while ensuring they've adopted enhanced encryption techniques and made the necessary modifications to their IAM policies to create an overall more secure and seamless migration into the cloud. Now, in general, you're going to find that there are two basic types of a gap analysis. We have a technical gap analysis and a business gap analysis. A technical gap analysis in the world of cloud computing would involve evaluating an organization's current technical infrastructure and identifying any areas where it falls short of the technical capabilities required to fully utilize their security solutions. For example, an organization might find that its current network infrastructure is simply not fast enough to support data in transit encryption, or a full zero-trust architecture, or that its current security protocols are not robust enough to protect the data being stored at rest inside of their cloud-based storage solution. Once those gaps have been identified, now the organization can develop a plan to address these issues and upgrade its technical infrastructure as needed. Now, on the other hand, we have a business gap analysis that involves evaluating the organization's current business processes and identifying any areas where they fall short of the capabilities required to fully utilize their new cloud-based solutions. For example, an organization may find that its current data management processes are not efficient enough to support cloud-based data storage and sharing, or that its current budgeting and forecasting processes are not accurate enough to support cloud-based financial management. Once the gaps have been identified, then the organization can develop a plan to move its business processes forward as needed to close that gap. Now, let's take a look at a real-world example. At one of my former organizations that I worked at, we conducted a vulnerability assessment once per week across the entire network. This vulnerability assessment was designed to uncover weak points in our digital infrastructure and systems. The assessment often found several software vulnerabilities in our different servers, some insufficient encryption for data in transit, and a few times we found outdated database configurations too. Each week, my team and I were responsible for looking over all the findings from the assessment and then determining which ones were the highest priority for us to fix, because we never have enough time, money, or resources to fix all of them in any given week. By understanding the seriousness of each finding, we could then create a plan of action and milestones known as a POA&M, and that would outline the specific measures to address each vulnerability and allocate resources and set up timelines for each of the remediation tasks that we needed to perform. This allowed us to prioritize the patching of critical software vulnerabilities and updating those database misconfigurations first. At the same time, we now know what the level of security is that we're trying to achieve, and our POA&M was an actionable way to get us from our current state to our desired state, and this helped us continually close the gap identified by our ongoing gap analysis in terms of our vulnerability management programs. So remember, a gap analysis really is a powerful tool that can help your organization to improve its security and its performance by identifying areas where improvements can be made. Whether you're looking to migrate into the cloud or you simply want to improve the security of your systems and networks, a gap analysis can help to achieve the desired outcomes and results for you. By following the steps of a gap analysis, you can ensure that you have a comprehensive plan in place to bridge the gap between your current and your desired states.